Body swapping is an incredibly popular genre where two or more people or creatures switch minds or bodies. There are actually many ways to achieve this, from soul swapping, brain transplants, and even through machinery. I've always been fascinated by this sort of topic ever since I was a little kid, and given this topic can go anywhere, from wholesome to NSFW to full-on degeneracy, if there's any inappropriate content in the media I'm covering, of course I'm gonna have to censor it because of YouTube. Also, while I don't consider TG or transformations as body swaps, I might as well cover some of them, given that there are some circumstances. And given that this is an Iceberg video, I have to say, I'm so surprised to this day that no one has made an Iceberg video based on this genre, so I might as well make it my own. This is everything I could find through a lot of research, memory, and any source of media that exists. If there's anything I missed, please let me know in the comment section below, and I might add it in a bonus video. So, without wasting any time, this is the body swapping Iceberg. So for this layer, I'm going to start off with the more common entries in media that I'm sure everyone's mostly familiar with. And from there, each layer we're going to dive into is going to get more obscure and less known throughout the public or fans of this genre. This is self-explanatory, so basically a ghost or a dead person or whatever entity can possess people or objects can sometimes control them or their person. So this can range from cartoony to straight up gore. This is something that can't be accomplished in the real world, but it's a transplant between two living brains, or sometimes just the brain itself. So a body swap can happen by switching minds, or sometimes having souls, which sometimes it can count as a possession, but it can be something entirely different. This can range from a body swapping machine, through extracting a soul, or even magic. It can pretty much go any way. The episode is about Jimmy getting humiliated by Cindy again, so he invents something that allows mind reading, but it all goes wrong. Mayhem ensues, and it's kind of funny how they pretend to act like each other. They then switch back in a weird sort of way. I'm not gonna lie, the thing I don't like about body switching is that they sometimes switch the voices, making it awkward. But here in Jimmy Neutron, they actually play off as each other well not to draw suspicion, and I think they did a great job with this episode. There's an episode of Gumball where Carrie possesses Gumball's body just to know what it's like to eat something. I mean, Fair, like, it would suck if I became a ghost and lost the ability to taste or eat. Then again, I wouldn't want some random ghost to possess me. To possess me and force me to eat junk food. I know American Dad has 4 episodes. The one where Stan swaps with a horse to win a race for money. The one where Klaus and Stan switches bodies because Stan refuses to place Klaus back in his original body. Klaus switches places with a frontman of the Earth, Wind, and Fire cover band. Oh, and there was one where Klaus faked his death and switched bodies with a nun in the future. Honestly, I like the episode between Stan and Klaus out of all of them. But they're all good regardless. I really need to rewatch the series. Katrina and Batman switch places just to get revenge against the villain who humiliated her. I've seen part of this episode, and I'm just gonna say for this one scene, Batman should have had more prep time given his disadvantage. But it has a lot of funny moments, especially that one part where Batman admits that Nightwing is afraid of monkeys, and that "glad you agree" response. That's actually hilarious. Okay, I've never seen Ben 10, but I think I remember an ad for the body swapping episode. I'm not familiar with the other iterations, so I'm only familiar with the 2005 version. That, and I've seen a clip on YouTube at some point. Charmcaster tries to swap bodies with Ben to steal his Omnitrix, but he swaps with Gwen instead. This leads to Gwen being mistaken as a bad guy and sent to prison, and later in the episode, a few mishaps happen and they end up switching back. I've had a little history with this episode. The Puppet King turns the boys into puppets, while Starfire and Raven switches bodies, teaming up to try and reverse the swap and save the boys. Starfire and Raven's body is honestly hilarious. Also, there's a video on YouTube that used to use the scene for this audio, but I'll talk about it later in the Iceberg. So, technically speaking, there is a body swapping scene. In the episode Dark Harvest, Zim swapped the brain of a school receptionist with a can of soda. I guess it may not count as a body swap, but then again, why is the soda controlling her body then, Bart? Why is it controlling the body? I don't know why, but that scene always stuck with me, given that this was really disturbing back in the day. Just like the Invader Zim episode, this also stuck with me for some reason. I think it was the episode where Buster had a nightmare for whatever reason. And he imagined Arthur and the chicken switching brains by aliens. I don't know why, but I can't seem to find the clip, given that there's a lot of episodes, but I guess it's something I just happen to remember from the show. Oh, this episode. Poindexter possesses and switches with Danny because he thought that he was basically a school bully, and he ends up in the ghost zone. Interestingly enough, YouTuber Dusk Till Sean covered this episode in great detail, so I recommend watching that if you're interested. I mean, it's interesting to see how they live each other's lives. There was another episode where Tucker possesses Paulina as well, which is pretty much a funny scene. I don't consider transformations as body swap, but the episode changes might as well count. The episode Mom and Jerry is also another body swapping episode. And I guess by that logic, Sister Mom is also another body swap episode. This franchise is rather famous for the body swapping genre. Of course, there's Captain Ginyu with his change ability. There's also Zamasu using the Super Dragon Balls to switch bodies with Goku. And then there are the what ifs. I know Ginyu has swapped with Vegeta, Trunks, and even Goku Black, believe it or not. And speaking of what ifs, there are many YouTube channels out there covering this sort of topic, and there are many crazy body swapping scenarios and ideas. And of course, there are mangas as well, such as, well, there is a multiverse manga, which did kinda have that one scene. I might as well stop there. There's a ton of ideas and scenarios out there. I guess anyone can body swap with whomever they want. Kinda like Dragon Ball, there are many ideas here. There are episodes like Dog Days Afternoon, Blondas Have More Fun, and the well-known episode Presto Changeo, Manic Mom Day, Which is Which, and the lesser-known episode Country Clubbed. There's a good amount of episodes out there that you can watch, and given that the new series, A New Wish, has come out, I'm guessing that there's gonna be even more body swapping episodes. So, there's a rather popular scene where Lois and Peter switch places for that small moment. There's also another episode, and it kinda goes crazy from here. I'm kinda surprised that there hasn't been any more body swapping episodes, but I think it's good for now. Oh yeah, this one has a really popular episode. Yeah, so there are many body swaps within this episode. What's also weird is that apparently you can also switch the mind of a robot using a living creature. But I guess anything is possible. This one has another body swapping episode, and actually there's two, technically. The first one has a lot of mayhem, where several people switches places. The second one is where Bill takes over Dipper's body, and yeah, I kinda get that Mabel is rather a not so popular character, but I personally like this episode. Also kinda reminds me of this meme. I clearly remember this episode. Imagine ending up in a car accident and they end up switching your brains with the passenger. Like, can they not tell the difference between the brain of a weasel and a baboon? At least Baboon is able to get the respect he deserves, even if it's just Weasel. This one is another one that I clearly remember, and I've always been confused as to why Toru is the bad guy the 1 minute, and then the good guy. But it turns out that he's changed sides in the later seasons. Anyways, this is a body swapping episode, and I think it's interesting that they switch places through astral projection. Those kinds of body swaps are kinda rare in the genre. I know, this show is rather infamous, but there's another episode I remember. There are two, of course, but I think the trope where the two people switch bodies just to live each other's lives is an interesting idea. The ending is pretty funny as well. Johnny Susan, Susan Johnny is rather forgettable. I am so surprised that Lex Luthor is, well, given that he's in Flash's body, he can easily be the most OP character in the show, given what Flash did to him earlier. I also like how Barry just acts like a typical Saturday morning cartoon villain. Classic stuff right there. Oh yeah, this episode's really popular, with a lot of funny moments. This episode kinda reminds me of the Powerpuff Girls episode. This video has been around since the early days of YouTube. I don't know much about this show, but it looks interesting overall. Now that I think about it, Disney sure has a lot of body swapping content. Yeah, so Experiment 355 causes several body swappings, but causing more mayhem in the process. This has been around YouTube as well, and it's the body swapping episode between Lily and Mitsuki. This is another I wish I lived your life for a day trope. I remember watching this episode, but I only remember the scene where Lizzie and her brother switching places.
And this one features Megamind and Roxanne switching bodies? Well, that could be kinda hot, I guess.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I've heard about this episode thanks to Sherfilla's Productions. It's interesting because it's a body swapping episode between an alien and a human. I mean, although the show rather sucks overall, but gets better in the later season, it's also interesting to hear that the characters pretend to act like one another. So this is a well-known episode throughout the My Little Pony community. What's interesting about this one is it's a swap between a shy character and one who's more extroverted, and a bit of a jerk. I swear though, I'm not a brony, so I don't know much about this franchise. Once again, this is another I wish I lived your life for a day trope. It's interesting to see how the three characters get into mishap. So, I'm fully aware of the episode between Perry and Candace, and I personally like Doofenshmirtz's reaction. Apparently, there's another episode, a swap between the aliens and main characters, which, yeah, I've never really seen that episode. Given that the show can go any way, I'm kinda surprised that this hasn't been a more common trope within the show. So, in the episode, Rigby's body, his body rejects his, I guess, soul? Or slime? Like, I guess his personal self? Apparently, this is a common trope of possession. But yeah, Rigby gets his body back. And overall, I guess the moral of this episode is, never eat too much junk food, or bad things will probably happen to you. Oh yeah, this episode. Imagine waking up as an old man or professor with hairy legs. But I'm sure a lot of you would be dying to switch with Miss Bellum, which, yeah, I can see why. Yeah, this is a great shift, except it's within city limits. Basically, a great shift is a worldwide body swapping scenario, although it could also range from citywide to worldwide. Anyways, this is an interesting episode overall, although I do feel sorry for Buttercup. At the time of writing this script, there are more than 760 episodes of The Simpsons. And out of all of them, there are technically 3, which is surprising given that The Simpsons is known for doing almost everything they can think of. Anyways, the first one, by technicality, is the Treehouse of Horror 2 episode, where Homer has his brain removed and placed in a robot body. There's also that future episode where Carl and Lenny switch brains, and it's been implied that Lenny's wife also had her brain swapped with a chimp. There's also that Treehouse of a Horror episode where Homer dies and has his soul placed in random bodies. I'm surprised they haven't made more body swapping episodes. I'm kinda surprised that the show even has a body swapping episode. Well, 2 if you count the time Kenny possesses Cartman's body because he drank his ashes. I realized that there was an episode when I was watching the DTV reaction of that famous Pip episode. The one where the queen wanted to place her soul inside the body of her daughter, I guess? Luckily, Pip was there to save the day. As far as South Park episodes go, I don't think this was a bad episode. Like, really? Is this really considered bad? If anything, I think Pip just gets overhated for no reason. So, there's an episode where Sonic and Eggman switches bodies, and it kinda reminds me of that Justice League episode. Overall, a good episode. There are actually a lot of funny moments out there. And I think I've seen this episode by watching that one guy's reaction. There's also a fan comic out there called Change Our Minds, where the group switches bodies, pretty much acting like each other, which is rather interesting. I know there is more Sonic related body swapping content, which I'll cover later in the Iceberg. Technically, there are 2 episodes out of all 270 episodes, which is rather surprising given that the show barely covers the topic of body swapping. There's the episode where SpongeBob is forced to work at the chum bucket, later having his brain placed in the robot body. That sounds familiar. There's also the episode where Patrick has his mind replaced with a coral, which, yeah, not much to talk about here. Oh yeah, this is another interesting one. So this show is rather infamous for, yeah. There are 2 episodes. The first one is rather forgettable, but the second one is more memorable. Also, it's a great shift episode. Yeah, so given the other bullshit that this show spews, What with switching brains with meddling kids? And the brain transplant between Velma and Daphne. It's honestly one of the worst body swapping ideas I've ever seen. Like, come on, let's be real here. Like, the Scooby Doo movie did a whole lot better job. I'm kind of surprised that, given that magic is more common within this world, you'd think that there'd be more like body switching ideas, but there's only two of them. The first one's between Alex and her mom, and the other one's between her best friend Harper. With the recent remake, yeah, there's actually a body swapping scene here, which is rather interesting. If the silent protagonist were to suddenly talk and call me his minion, yeah, like, something's obviously off with the Mario brother. Also, Super Mario Odyssey is a game where you can technically possess and control other beings. Using a hat, of course. If it were to fall on the wrong hands, there could be consequences. Okay, so this has to be the most popular and rather well-known body switching genre. This is a common trope, a swap between a mother and a daughter or between family members. And there are several movie iterations. There's a 1976 version, the 1995 version, the rather well-known 2003 version, and the 2018 version. And technically speaking, we might as well add the 2020 version as well. I also know a version between a Japanese woman and a black man, but I'll cover that later in the Iceberg. So, given that this movie is the least popular within the franchise, I think it still had an interesting body swapping scene between Puss and Donkey. But yeah, it's really nothing that special. This is a rather popular body switching anime movie between two people. I haven't seen the movie myself yet, but I actually recommend giving this movie a watch if you're a fan of the body swapping genre. It sounds interesting. Yeah, believe it or not, Pokemon has a few body swapping, I guess, genres or content. I know the Pokemon movie, Manaphy uses Heart Swap for body swapping. I believe in Super Smash Bros. Brawl for the Wii also had that ability, so that's interesting. There's one entry in the Iceberg that I'll be covering later, between Meloetta and Iris. This is another popular body swapping movie, which Rob Schneider is pretty much the hot chick. It's rated PG-13. Anyways, this is a body swap between a man and a teenage girl, which, when you think about it, this one kinda aged poorly. But yeah, I also remember this movie because I remember back in the early days of YouTube, the princess and the servants used to like switch bodies because she wanted to avoid the wedding. And it was actually interesting, like, when you actually think about it, I guess you think, like, whatever happened to those two? Is the servant well off as the princess now? Or maybe they're both living each other's lives for the better. A comment in this video brought up a good point that this should have been the plot for the movie instead, given it has so many interesting possibilities. Yeah, there's a lot of art out there. Some you can easily find through Google, and some throughout forums. Of course, you're gonna have to research that stuff on your own. On YouTube, there are dozens of playlists with this sort of genre, some ranging within the thousands of videos, but I'm guessing that a lot of these videos are lost or deleted. Still, it's interesting to see how many videos are there on YouTube. This is a Spanish translation for body swap, which is something I commonly searched back in the day. Apparently, it's just as popular as a topic within the Spanish-speaking community, which, yeah. There are a lot of Spanish shows and topics I could talk about here, but I'll save that for later. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, there is lost media, although I haven't heard much from the public. I know there's an Avril Lavigne story I'm aware of, but as far as lost media topics, I'll talk about it later in the Iceberg, alongside some videos I've encountered in the past. So there's that episode where Rick escapes jail and uses body swapping to pretty much escape and get revenge against the council. There's also that one episode where Rick and Jerry, I guess technically they switch places, but it's such a weird episode. I guess it's some sort of fusion body swap or conscious merging. I'm not really an expert on this, so I wouldn't know. I guess technically, if we're gonna add another episode to this, there's that one time where Rick dies and he pretty much ends up in the body of another version of himself. And he tries to go back home through his universe, so yeah. Alpha did cover one of the anime episodes in his video, which is rather unique, but I'm more aware of the switch between Enchantra and Sabrina, which I saw the plot for the episode, and excuse me, but why would you want to switch bodies with a dictator? That's like switching bodies with a certain German dictator. Besides the animated series, there's also the sitcom show, which in one episode she drinks a boy brew potion to turn into Jack, which normally I don't consider transformations as body swap, but it's all magic and stuff. There's also another episode where she transforms herself into Libby, another character through pretty much transformation. Oh, and apparently the 1969 Sabrina show, the episode When the Cat's Away, also had a body swapping episode. I could have sworn that the sitcom had more body swapping episodes, but they're mostly transformations. I am aware of this episode. Glenn and Brett switches bodies, with Glenn betting that Brett wouldn't last a day being ugly and poor. At first, Glenn is living the life, while Brett is miserable in his new body. But things make an unexpected turn, with Glenn basically not learning his lesson. Interesting stuff. Imagine switching bodies with a dinosaur. I mean, it's rather a cool idea, but unless it's a polymorph spell, I would not recommend it. Yeah, so in the episode, Lunelia and her dinosaurs pretty much switch bodies. Kinda like the Jimmy Neutron episode, except they switch bodies all over again. Multiple times, actually. Now that I think about it, this has to be pretty much the most body swaps I've ever seen in any fictional episode. It's a pretty good episode, I recommend watching it. I just mentioned this earlier, but I recommend watching this video. Alpha covers several body swapping episodes for many shows, covering the plots, ideas, and his feelings for each episode. It's a pretty good video overall. I don't know how I managed to miss this one, but I thought the Chowder episode was pretty good overall. Nothing much to say about it. The idea of body swapping in both manga and anime seemed to be very popular, and it's been happening since the 80s. There are a whole ton of them to cover, and it can range from wholesome to NSFW, but there's something you might enjoy.